Episode1. So Episode1 is an early stage VC. We invest in UK companies only as part of our fund mandate. So, and we have a real preference for having our really early stage companies in the same building as us when we initially invest. So we initially invest sort of £250 to £1 million in teams of 2, 3, 4 people, so really early stage. Typically teams that have raised 150 grand of SEIS money in the UK, have got a working MVP, maybe a couple of pilot customers, in ideal world some paid customers. And what we do then is our kind of USP, if you like, is we try and help that team of entrepreneurs to go from a team of entrepreneurs and help them build a company. So in terms of the backgrounds of the partners, I'm the only one who's never had a proper job in our partnership, so I'm not really sure why I'm stood up here at all. It should be somebody else. So I worked in the private equity industry for 20 years. Told you I never had a proper job. And I met a guy as I spent quite a lot of time angel investing during that period, and I met a guy called Simon Murdoch, who was the managing partner and the brains of our operation. So Simon was the first investor in Zoopla. The very first investor in Zoopla, one of the very first investors in Shazam, first investor in Love Film, a business called Natural Motion, which many of you won't have heard of, which sold to Zynga Games for about $500 million a couple of years ago. So he's got a fantastic track record. He was also Amazon's first employee outside of Europe, so he sold his business to Amazon in 1998. It took him 12 months to raise his capital, and about 6 weeks to sell the company to Amazon. So and the 12 months raising money is one of the reasons we behave like we do. So when we meet companies, if we don't like the idea and we're not going to invest, we'll tell you at the end of the first meeting. Rather than wasting your time and our time, we'll just say, we don't think this is a VC-backable business. We won't say we don't like you. Sometimes it is because we don't like you, but we're bold and we're frank, but we're not rude, or we try not to be. But what we will do is we'll talk to you as if we're already an angel investor in your company when you come and see us. So we kind of try and pretend that we're at our 6th board meeting with you, and we'll actually rip apart your deck. If we think your deck needs ripping apart, we'll tell you that you ought to focus on one aspect of what you're doing rather than another aspect of doing. We'll try and make introductions. If we think you're maybe too early for us, we'll introduce you to accelerators or angel investors who we think are relevant. And then once we have invested, we are super hands-on. So we have monthly board meetings with our companies. I talk to most of my companies at least every week. And a couple of examples from our portfolio. So CarWow, which is one of our companies, we invested in James when it was him and his co-founder, and we paid for him to take his CTO from just a weekend warrior to being a full-time employee. And we helped him hire his first 5 or 6 people. He was in the same office as us. He now has 70 people. He's just opened in Germany, and we've raised 3 or 4 rounds of funding since we initially invested. Another company much earlier is a company called Attest, which is trying to provide customer research and consumer insight via an app, a mobile app. And before we invested, we sat down and said, okay, so why isn't this going to work if it's not going to work? We said we did what we call a pre-mortem. So pre-mortem is kind of looking forward. If it doesn't work, what's going to be the factor that makes this not work? And he had a plan of getting lots of sales guys. And having talked through this pre-mortem, we decided actually that would almost be the worst thing to do, because if he got lots of sales guys and got lots of traction, his tech wasn't robust enough to support lots of users. He didn't have security platforms, so he couldn't go to any big customers and sell with any real authority. He never got through IT clearance. So we encouraged him to spend all his money up front on tech. Paul McNabb, who is one of the other partners, has had 2 startups, was global head of strategy at Cisco for 10 years, Cisco Services, excuse me. And Paul has interviewed every single tech hire that the company's made over the last 6 months. And every quarter, we sit down with every single one of our investee companies and say, okay, so how's the last quarter gone? What do we need to do? What do we need to do to raise Series A? Fundamentally, you've either got to get to break even, or you've got to raise more money. And if you don't raise more money, we try and help you figure out how you can get to break even.